Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta. If you're looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast that you should be listening to. Please remember to subscribe, give a rating and a review by the end of this episode. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by Urmi Hossain. She is, listen to this, she is Italian by birth, Bengali by blood, and Canadian by law. What an identity, huh? And before I go any further, please help me welcome Urmi. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very glad that you are here.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your exotic. That's still an offensive word. I don't know.
No, I love it.
I'm in America, so sometimes you gotta be careful. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes, so as you mentioned, my name is Urmi, and the way I like to always identify myself is I am Italian by birth, I am Bengali by blood, and Canadian by law. So I was born and raised in Italy, and my parents are from Bangladesh. I lived my whole life in Italy. I have done pretty much my whole education in Italy until I moved to Canada, where I did my university in finance. I graduated from a bachelor degree of finance, and I've been working for about 6 years in the financial services industry. And in my free time, I like to do a lot of volunteering activities and support causes that are really dear to my heart, where one of them is women's empowerment. And I have my own YouTube channel. I also have my own blog where I try to educate people about, public speaking, finance, lifestyle. I talk about different things that I do in my own life. So I would say that's who I am in a nutshell.
That's wonderful. It looks like there's a lot that we're going to talk about on this episode regarding your experiences. So first of all, let's start off. You say your parents moved from Bangladesh to Italy.
Yes.
Usually when people who are not from any of the European countries move to Europe, just to make life easier, they usually move to an English-speaking country. Do you know any reason why your parents picked Italy?
So funny story is before they moved to Italy, they had other two countries in mind. They had actually Canada and they had UK along with Italy. I do not know why my dad actually did not choose the other two countries, Canada or UK, and he has of course chosen Italy. And I think he has chosen Italy because it was easier to move to Italy back in the days. So basically, when he moved to Sicily, which is in the south of Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was much easier for him to move there. And of course, like you mentioned, it's always hard, especially when you do not know the language. And
that's why my question, yes, because usually people say that they don't have to worry about the language barrier.
Yeah, so he started from zero, like literally. Him and my dad and my mom, they both started from zero. And my dad, he actually learned Italian, and he was like one of the first few many Bengali people that have moved to Italy. So because after that, other Bengali people started to move as well in Italy. And he was sort of like a point of reference for the whole Bengali community. Like people would go to him every time they had questions or every time they had to fill up some paper, because he was the only one that knew the language properly and knew about the whole system in Italy, unlike other people that have just moved there. And I think also he has such a big reputation in the community that everyone knows who he is. And he often also tells me oh, you're the first Bengali girl to be born in Italy. So I'm like, okay, I guess I would brag about it. But yeah, so he was the very, very first one, because people moved either to Rome or in the south, and he actually decided to go through Sicily. So he moved to Palermo, and then he decided to have a family, to have his own life there. And then little by little other people followed, and he also brought his brother, and then we had a very, very big community of Bengali people back in the days.
Hmm. Did your parents ever mention to you how long it took them to learn the language?
Never. And you know what? I never even asked him. Actually, it's only my dad who learned the language because my mom nowadays, she still doesn't know the language. Like
Oh,
she never,
really?
yeah,
Oh,
she
okay.
never like forced herself to learn it because she has been a housewife for her whole life. So she was raising
Right.
me and my sister, whereas my dad, he was the one like literally like working and learning the language and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Because like I said, usually people move to English-speaking countries if they already speak English, so that it's easier to just get a job and
Yeah, I
adapt.
know. I know.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about you. So you were born there, but you are Bengali by blood, as you said. As you were growing up, and like you said, your family was the first Bengalis in Sicily. Did you have experiences that made you be constantly reminded that you're different?
Yes, and it basically happened in two settings. So when I was at school, I was always super conscious that I was not Italian because everyone around me was Italian. Like all the my
Did they
classmates.
say something to you, or you just felt that way by yourself?
No, I just felt it. I
Oh,
just
okay.
felt it. It was just my feeling, and I was very much aware that there were not that many immigrant kids. So when I was doing my primary school, there were not that many immigrant kids. And only when I was doing my high school that I started to see like few people. Like we had like a one Chinese student in the whole school, and then we had one girl from, I think she was from Ecuador, and that was pretty much it. Like there were not that many people that were like immigrants or parents who were like literally immigrants. So I was super always aware that, I don't look Italian because you can see it from my features that I don't. But then when I would start speaking Italian, people were like, okay, like she's easygoing. They would always make me feel very at ease. And I always felt very much myself when I was around them because I also grew up from this like Western culture. But at home, I felt a little bit uncomfortable where I felt like sometimes I was not myself because yes, I looked very much Bengali, but then inside of me, I always felt very much Italian. And I feel like often my ideas often were in conflict with the ideas of my parents because they're like Bengali. So they have that whole cultural thing that comes with it where, women have to be a certain way, they have to do certain things. So when I was growing up, I felt there were a lot of restriction around me, what I could do, what I could not do. And sometimes they mix it up with religion and culture, telling me that, oh, it's in our religion that tells you like you cannot do this. But in reality, it's like a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there were like simple things where like, let's say I wanted to go out for a movie and I couldn't because they were so worried about it. Or they would say, girls do not go to movies. Like, why would you want to go to the movie? So they were very, very strict because they're not used to seeing this. Because when they grew up, there was no one in their family who went for movies, like no one, literally. So it was
Oh,
different for them too. Yeah.
I can imagine like the cultural adaptation for them. And in addition to that, when they have this new baby who's Bengali by blood, but they're not living in Bangladesh. And therefore, like you said, they still have the Bengali culture and perceptions and way of raising kids, but they're not raising the kid in Bangladesh.
Yes, I
They're
know.
now in Italy, and you living this Italian life. You got Italian friends, you go to movies, but they still have the cultural perspectives from the that conflict
Yes.
between the two generations and the two cultures must have been something quite challenging.
Yes, like unlike other parents, I feel like my parents, they have never really like progressed in terms of culture. Like, yes, they did adapt, but not completely because I think they still wanted to keep their Bengali roots and they wanted to like transfer it to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I feel like as a parent, you cannot expect that, especially when you're moving to a different country, which is not the one from your home country, where different rules and people are brought up in a different way. And we're not anymore in the 1920s. You were in 1991, we're in year 2000. Things have changed. So this is also has been a topic with my cousin as well. He was telling me the exactly same thing. He was like, our parents, they cannot expect us to be like a typical Bengali person. Like we are different. We call them like the third culture kid. Like we just have that added culture, that added view that they did not see. So they should just be okay with how we see the world and how we want to live the world. So for my parents was a little bit different. I think they, even nowadays, they still haven't changed much.
Let's try and have a bit of compassion for them. I hear what you're saying. Let's try and have a bit of compassion for them and see things from their perspective. First of all, your country, your culture, your language, your roots, they're a huge part of your identity. What you've always thought you were and who you think you are is usually rooted in that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to a different culture and they do things differently compared to where you come from and who you know yourself to be, there's always that thing of, am I still Bengali if I do this thing now instead of what I was raised to be? Because it changes your whole identity. And identity is just about everything about
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It From their perspective, I think even though they've been there all those years, there's always that pull of, I don't want to forget who I am. I don't want to be lost in this Italian maze and not know who I am anymore. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm not forgetting who I am. I'm embracing both, which is different.
No, I'm talking about them.
Them,
The
I
reason
know,
they are
I
so
know.
stuck in the ways of where they
Yes,
come from, even though they were on Italian soil.
yes, and I do agree with you. And it's because they just love so much their own home country that they don't want to lose that. And I think they wanted both of their kids to also have that. But you cannot, the way I like to see it is that you cannot force that on someone, because sometimes I feel like because of these cultural barriers, I didn't like being associated to the Bengali identity. I did not at some point.
Here's my question. Have you ever been there?
Yes, 4 times.
Do you speak the language?
Yes.
Oh, because you spoke it at home with your mom?
Yes.
So you were bilingual when you were growing up. Okay. Because that's the other thing as well that is hard for them to understand is you didn't grow up in Bangladesh. Visiting there 4 times versus growing up, you didn't grow up there. So you don't have the affinity towards it that they do. Because they were there all their lives until they decided to move to Italy and give birth to you. So you don't have that connection, that attachment to it to the level that they do. And I think that's the part they struggle with.
Yeah.
To understand.
I do agree with you. I do agree with you. And that's the thing. Like, I don't have that attachment that they have because I did not grow up there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it makes me question, look how global the world is. You have people moving like your parents to different countries and having kids in a different culture. You have people getting married, the two of them from completely different parts of the globe and learning to, do you understand my culture? And I need you to understand my culture. And we do things like this from where I come from. And then they're going to be raising kids in a different culture. It's it's a whole other dynamic to deal with. Based on your experiences, what are some of the things that you can share that can help people in those situations where they end up having what we can call an identity crisis?
So for me, it took a lot of years, and I would say my whole identity crisis, it literally started, I would say, it started from when I was a kid, but then I feel like it was always being reinforced when I was a teenager, because that's when you're like understand things and stuff like that. And I struggle a lot even when I came to Canada with my whole identity, because at least back in Italy, no one was ever asking me where I was from. But in Canada, people do ask you where you're from. And I struggle because I was like, what do I say? Do I say I'm from Italy? Do I say I'm from Bangladesh? What exactly am I saying? and people questioned no matter what answer I was giving. Like if I said Italian, people did not believe me. They were like, "Oh, but you do not look Italian." People questioned it a
You
lot.
serious?
People questioned it. And when I would say Bengali, people questioned it regardless, because they were like, "Oh, but you have an Italian accent, or you have a Spanish accent when you speak English." And again, everyone questioned that all the time. And I didn't like it when people were questioning my identity, because I was like, you are in no place to question who I am. And even back then, and I'm talking when I was like 2022, I still didn't know how to answer this. And it was only like, I would say after 5-6 years that I'm like, you know what? I embrace both culture. Like I like both cultures. I know that my parents were like super hard on me when they raised me and stuff like that, but there is still like a beauty in this, like we have beautiful traditions, we have beautiful clothes, we have very good food, people are warm and welcoming. And I also love the whole Italian culture, because that's where I feel like I belong. People made me feel like I belong to them, then even though I knew that I was not looking like them. And all my friends, they always made an effort to understand me. I know how hard it was for them to understand why, I could not go to their house, or why I could not be outside for longer, like until, let's say, 9 or 10 p.m. They always made an effort to like come forward, like meet me halfway. They tried so much to understand me, which is something that I'm like super grateful for. But for
Wow.
me, it took a lot of reflection to come up with this answer, because I was like, I don't want to go and just answer one nationality, because I don't belong to one. I belong to multiple nationality.
But I think it's sad that people should actually, whatever answer you give them, they question you.
And people
Like,
did.
how do you know me better than I know myself? Who are you? It doesn't make sense.
I know.
It doesn't
It's
make sense at all. I think there's a soccer star. His name is Mario
Balotelli.
Yes.
Yes.
He is African, but
Yes.
he was born in Italy.
Yes.
To this day, he's a soccer star. He scores goals, he wins matches for his team. To this day, you still have Italians shouting at him on the grounds and throwing bananas at him and saying, "Go back to Africa." He was
I know.
born in Italy.
I know. I know about the whole story of Mario Balotelli. I know.
So that's why I'm saying, how do people actually get to tell you who you are? I don't get that.
That's what I don't get as well. I'm like, you are in no place to tell me what I am. Like, not at all.
Interesting. So how did you decide that out of everything you're going to study finance?
So basically it was just like that. Like I never had in my mind to study finance. It was actually my minor. And so my major was actually international business. And then I was like, I don't like this subject. Like it's so boring. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. So then I took like few finance courses, and I was like, that's it. I'm in love with this. I'm gonna make it my major. And this was the best decision ever. And I remember like taking so many classes. I even extended my stay in the university actually, because my grades were pretty good, and they allowed me to get into the honors program in finance. So I wrote also a thesis about art and wine investing, and it was just a subject that I always loved, because it's so dynamic and it's so rich. There's always something happening. There's always something new in the whole financial industry, and everything is connected to finance. Like you have accounting connected to finance. Um, you have a fintech, so you have technology connected to finance.
Economics.
You have economics connected to finance. So everything is like connected to finance. So basically, finance is at the core of everything. You know what I
Of
mean?
course, the world is run by money.
Exactly, and that's exactly my point. Like it's such an important subject in our life. Like literally, everyone needs to know about finance.
Just a quick one here, because I'm South African. I heard you mention the honors. In
Honors.
America, they don't have an honors program. So after your bachelor's, you go straight to master's. So we do bachelor's, honors, and master's back home. Is that the same thing in Canada?
It's actually part of the undergraduate. So I think there is an honors program in your graduate as well in Canada, but The one I did was part of my undergraduate, and not everyone is able to enroll into the honors program. Usually people just do the Bachelor of Finance, but if you have, like I said, a certain GPA, then you can take an extra year just to do some research on a topic that you choose, and then you write your thesis.
It's also 1 year to do honors back home as well. That's interesting. You mentioned that, because as soon as you step out of South African boundaries, you're like, what's an honors? We do bachelors and we go straight to masters.
Yeah, and I also think it's the same in Canada, because I feel like not that many people do the honors program during the undergraduate.
Right. So now you work in finance. How long have you been working in finance?
6 years.
6 years. What made you start a blog?
I want to say it was my sister.
Oh.
Yeah, because so it was literally like 2 years ago, and then we were just talking, and then she was like, oh, I have a blog. And I was like, a blog? What's a blog? And then she was like, yeah, I write articles and stuff like that. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should just have a blog too. So it just purely started from there, like no plan. I was like, oh, maybe I should just do it. Like I was so curious about this. So I created my own blog, and I was thinking, like, I have so much that I can offer to the world, and I have so much knowledge that I want to share. So I'm just gonna create this blog. And my main target initially was like, I'm gonna target women, but I noticed that a lot of the people that read my blog are usually like men. And I don't know, I think my content is pretty interesting to them. So because I share pretty much everything. I share like,
is it finance related? Because obviously that's
some of them, yes. Some of them are finance related.
Okay.
Yes. And basically when I created my blog, I struggled a little bit because I was like, I don't know how much I want to say about myself there. And initially I was not comfortable talking about myself, putting a picture, stuff like that. But then one day a friend of mine was like, you know what, if you want people to relate to you, to your story, you have to like say it there, and you have to have a picture, because people want to see who's the person behind this. So then little by little I started to become comfortable, and I know that my story is something that people can now relate to. And people are always super curious about my story, how I'm like Bengali, Italian, and things like that. And that's how I created it. And now I'm very much more comfortable like writing on my blog, and I also use it to work on my writing skills, because eventually I want to be able to have my own book. So far it's been amazing. I feel like I get a lot of feedback. People really like what I talk about.
Do people give comments? And
people they cannot leave comments, but they can send me a message directly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's how you're able to connect with them, and you get the feedback on how what you're writing has touched them and things like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So your mission is, you said something about women empowerment. How did that come about? Why is your mission women empowerment?
So it came from like different places, but the main one, it was mainly from my own personal experience and how like women are seen in the whole like South Asian culture. Like there is a lot of double standards and gender stereotypes like in other cultures. But because I felt it really on my own skin, that I was like, you know what, I want to do something where women can actually have the freedom to choose. And that's how I was like, I want to create a blog where I talk about my own ways and how I choose my own things. And also I support this cause by volunteering activities. So I mentor actually women who just wants to learn a little bit about me. So they want to learn things like public speaking, or they want to learn like how do you work to get a promotion, or they want to learn about finance, or simply they want to learn how to create a blog. It is something that I feel like it helps them to empower themselves just by sharing my whole story. So hoping that, they can get inspired and they can start their own thing, they can start their own journey to be able to choose for themselves instead of having the society dictating their life. So that's how it all started.
I'm trying to make a distinction here between your parents being strict just because they were protecting you as their child versus that being a cultural thing. And the reason I'm asking is because even when I was raised in the 80s, I was born in 1976, so I was raised in the 80s. My parents were strict as well. I was not allowed to have a boyfriend until I had a boyfriend in high school. My dad didn't know. I told my mom because he would have lost it. It was like only start thinking about having a boyfriend when you finish high school. And then, my parents are strict as well. If I wasn't home by 3:30, because school finished at 2:30 and then time for the bus, almost an hour, etc. They were strict in our household in that regard, but it didn't necessarily mean that our society was that way. Am I making sense?
Yes, maybe for your case.
So do you feel like your parents weren't just strict just to protect you, but you feel it was a cultural, societal expectation on their part?
It was both. It was both, but the cultural part really played a lot because the whole South Asian community, we really care about what people think. This is so common. People really care about what you do and what you do not do, and people like to gossip a lot about it. And it's very important to have a good reputation in the whole South Asian community. People really care about their reputation more than anything else. So that really was important for them, to be able to keep their reputation. So if I did anything wrong, that could have, that could have had consequences.
Because then people turn around and say, who raised you? And then they'll start naming your parents and say, they did not do a good job with her. Look how she turned out.
Yeah.
It's interesting for me, like I said, especially because now they were in a Western culture where things are different.
Mm-hmm.
Women are not as restricted as you were explaining just now. So the conflict between the two, it must have been very hard.
Yes, it was. It was pretty difficult, and it still is. Honestly, it hasn't changed much, at least from their side.
Here's what I've always wondered, because us in Western countries, we always talk about some of the countries where the culture is still that way, especially towards women. And I say, oh no, they need to be free, they need to be this, and they need to be. I've always wondered, do they want that for themselves, or are we looking from our perspective?
When you say our perspective,
from the Western culture. For instance, let me give you an example. When you talk about a few years ago, I think only then were Saudi women allowed to have driver's licenses.
Yes, I remember this part. Yeah.
So before that, when us in Western countries talk about them, we used to think, oh my goodness, all the world governments should go there and make sure that this country gives women their driver's licenses. This is not right. It should not be happening in 2022. You know how we are. My question was, do those women want that for themselves? Do they feel, we look at them as oppressed, do they feel that way about their lives? Because that's all they've ever known, remember?
Right. And I think as a woman, you want to have options. This is how I see it.
That's all they've ever known. You think that way about options just because you grew up in Italy, which is now a Western country with freedom, and it's not like Bengali culture. But when that's all you've ever known, do you think to yourself, I'm oppressed? Because let me be honest, I've watched some of their YouTube videos when the way they dress up and the conservative styles, they don't, some of them say, why are you feeling sorry for me? I don't feel oppressed. I'm fine with my life.
So to answer that point, that particular example, I do know, like, let's talk about the hijab, for instance. Like, I know people that were wearing the hijab and then decide to not wear it anymore.
Right. And in which country were they? In a Western country or?
In both, Western and non-Western, because I see it in both worlds. I've seen it. I've seen women, especially in the Western world, where they would like wear the hijab, and then the next thing you know is that they're not wearing it anymore. And you start wondering, you start reflecting, like, what was going on? Like, why did they make that decision? And sometimes I feel like they wore that hijab because it was probably told to them to wear it, but they never felt they were themselves when they wore it. So that's where I think the option comes where you can choose whether or
So
not you
you
want
are
to.
a proponent of the power of choice, and that
Yeah,
if that's what you still want,
yeah,
do it because you still choose to want it.
exactly. Not because someone is telling you. Like, and there are
Mm.
other women who decide to wear it because they feel good and comfortable with it, and that's a choice
Right.
that you do, and that we all respect it. We all respect
Mhm.
any choices that you do.
Right. So for you, it's choice,
Yeah,
not that we should change them and make them think like us. Because I think sometimes
exactly.
that's the trap we fall into, thinking, oh, we have freedoms, we have democracies, we are better.
Yeah.
So we should convert them to become like us, which I'm not a proponent of.
No, me neither, because I think there is no right or wrong answer. It's whatever you
Exactly.
choose to do with it. And that's okay too. Everything is okay.
I fully agree. I'm on
Yeah.
board with that. Now let's talk about your journey at Toastmasters.
Yeah.
It's a
So
big
let me
thing.
tell you a little bit about it.
Mhm.
So I actually joined Toastmaster in 2015,
Same year
but
as me. I joined in 2015 August.
mine was, I don't know, I think it was in, I don't remember when, but it was not a long journey. I think after 8 months, I left it. I
Oh, okay.
literally, I left it. But then in 2019, I was like, I want to go back to it because I told to myself that I want to do a TED Talk eventually, and I need to work on my public speaking
Wow.
skills. And that's how I joined Toastmaster back again in 2015. I'm still part of this club. And initially, when I joined it, I was scared to death. I was like, well, who's making me do this? But I pushed myself to do it. And it just
Hold
happened
that
to,
thought because we
yeah,
talk about it in this podcast. When you feel that fear, what is it that you're feeling and what is it that you're telling yourself?
I'm telling myself that I can do it. It's not the end of the world. I
But I'm saying,
literally,
what are people afraid of when they go there for the very first time?
we're afraid of being judged. At least that's how I felt about it. That's how I
Okay.
felt about it.
Huh. That's interesting. Carry on.
And so I was pretty much afraid of that people were going to judge me. But the moment I went there and they made me talk for 2 minutes, asking me, why are you here? I was super nervous, but then I felt good. I felt pretty good about it. I was like, you know what? I'll be back
Mhm.
there. And for a couple of, I would say a month, I still felt always super nervous every time I was going there. But then little by little, I started to become a bit more confident, I think. And I think because of my confidence, they asked me if I wanted to be the VP of education. So I did that for two
Wow.
years. I did the VP of education for 2 years. I loved it. I loved this role. And and then the year after, they asked me, do you want to be the president? I was like, yeah, I think I'm ready for it. So I like taking on these leadership skills because they really
Mhm.
helped me to work on my skills, became much more confident, increase my self-esteem. And honestly, like I feel like the whole Toastmaster community is like a family because they all support you, they're all encouraging you, and no one is judging you the way I used to think.
No,
Like I make a
I always
mistake.
feel like Toastmasters brings out the best in each person, and that's where we connect. And that's
Yeah.
why it's the kind of community that it is. Just for the benefit of our listeners who've never been part of Toastmasters, let's first talk about some of the participation when you first start. So when you said they made you speak for 2 minutes, is that you introducing yourself?
Yeah, so if you are going there as a guest, they
Mhm.
will basically tell you like present yourself, like tell us why you're here, and you're literally speaking for like a minute,
Mhm.
and that's where they are like testing, or you're seeing how you speak for the first time. So it's pretty like I want to say it's intimidating if it's your first time because you do not know anyone there and you're like put on the spot right
Right.
off the bat and you're like, what's going on? So they make you speak for like a minute, but that's not
Mhm.
the end because you speak again when you have the table topic session. So that's the impromptu speeches where you have someone asking you a question and you have to come up with this mini speech right off the butt and
For
right
two
off,
minutes.
yeah,
Yeah.
for 2 minutes.
Mhm.
And again, you are seeing how you speak, like you are able to analyze, okay, am I able to speak? Am I able to come up with an answer right away? And I honestly, the table topic session is probably the scariest part of the whole meeting, honestly. But I would say it's the most rewarding because it's because of the table topic session that I'm able to handle all this conversation with people that I meet for the podcast shows. And I also have my own YouTube channel, and I saw how Toastmaster really helped me to come up with the content. And usually I don't have a script. I just speak. It's like an impromptu speech. I just speak. I don't.
That's what table topics is. Yes, an impromptu speech of 2 minutes, unprepared. Impromptu 2 minutes, unprepared, because the rest of the speeches, the speakers were told the previous week or so to prepare, and they know exactly what they're gonna say. But the 2-minute table topics impromptu speech, you think on your feet right there and then.
Yes, that's it.
And it's scary at first, but it's good practice, and the more you do it, it's actually a lot more fun.
Yes, and you cannot just be silent. You have to speak.
Oh no, you have to.
You have to speak.
People are there to support you, like I said, support, welcoming, there to help you. It's a wonderful community. And then you mentioned you were VP of Education. Please explain in layman's terms what that is.
So basically, for every Toastmaster club, you have a team of you have an executive team. These are people that are designated each year to basically run these meetings, because who creates the agenda, who brings ribbons? You have a group of people behind the scenes that are doing all this work. Like, how do you make sure that these meetings are run efficiently? How do we find guests? How do we bring in more members? So for instance, the VP of Education is the person responsible on creating the agenda, assigning the roles, and making sure that you complete your pathway program. So basically, when you join the Toastmaster, there is this pathway program that you have to enroll into, and each pathway has a series of projects that you have to complete. And the VP of Education is there to like literally making sure that you are enrolled into the pathway, that you are making progress. And then of course we have the mentor program, where basically you can get paired up with someone that is a bit more experienced, and they can help you or guide you through your journey at Toastmasters. So that's in a nutshell what the VP of Education does.
Right. That is an amazing explanation. And mentorship is so important because, like I said, you got these pathways and these manuals. When you are new, it's so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you're doing your projects and your presentations the way that you've been given guidance in your manual. So it's really good to have a mentor. And what are some of the things that you've learned or have improved about yourself since joining Toastmasters?
I want to say a lot of things because I think there is always this misconception about Toastmaster. Like everyone thinks it's just for public speaking, but it's really not. It's you get to learn all these other things like communication skills, teamwork, organizational skills, time management skills, and you also get to improve your English because there is a grammarian role, and people are not aware of this. And I want to say, for me, most importantly, I think I've learned a lot from I learned a lot my critical thinking skills, because you have to give constructive feedback, and you use these not just at Toastmaster but everywhere. Like whether you're working or you're a student, like you always have to make sure that you're giving constructive feedback, nothing negative. You want to make sure that this person is improving from whatever they have just delivered. And I feel like that has been super, super helpful for me, especially when, let's say, I work in a team or I'm working with my coworkers and I have to like give them, I have to give them a feedback. There is a proper way of saying it. You always want to make sure that you're giving points of improvement. And that has been super, super helpful for me.
Right. And on this podcast as well, we emphasize leadership skills. So Vice President of Education, Vice President of Membership, President, which when they nominated me to be president at the time, I was in South Korea. I had been there for less than a year. Can you imagine how nervous I was? Because I just thought this is too much. But you actually learn to be, because as president now, Vice President of Education and Membership and all the other vice presidents who oversee everything else, you have to learn to delegate.
Yeah.
You have to learn to trust that they will do what they are supposed to for the club to run. that the leadership skills, you are literally thrown into the pool and you must learn to swim. But people are there to support you and they do their best.
Yes, and you
And
have
when somebody does not do what they're supposed to, as the president, you need to chip in. You're not going to pass the buck, even though
yes,
you
yes,
don't pass the buck as president.
yes,
It falls on you if somebody is absent or is not doing what they're supposed to, for the club to run and for everything to get done.
yes. And you have trainings, yearly trainings, where you get trained by previous presidents and they tell you how to perform the role. And every person in Toastmasters, like that saying that everyone is wearing a different hat. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly.
Yes.
So it is like that. It is like that. You just have a very rich experience there. That's how I see it. Yeah.
And after being president, you can go back to being VP of something else. It doesn't mean it's a demotion.
Yeah, exactly.
It benefits you to have all those different experiences, because all the leadership skills, the communication skills, delegation, negotiation, motivating people, all of those things come together the more you volunteer yourself to play those different roles.
Agreed. Yes, definitely.
Oh, May, this has been such a wonderful discussion. You have so much wisdom for somebody this young.
Thank you. Thank you. I like that.
Urmi, the Italian by birth, Bengali by blood, and Canadian by lore, friend of the Speaking of and Communicating podcast. Any last words before we ask for your social media handles?
Yes. So I have a couple of social media accounts. So
we're gonna ask you for those later. We want you to give us some last words of wisdom.
Oh, last words of wisdom. This one that I always like is be comfortable with uncomfortable. And this one is very much related if you want to like try new things. And I'm saying this from my own experience, especially with the Toastmaster. Like it was me getting out of my bubble and getting out of my comfort zone. And it's not something that will happen overnight. It's something that takes time and it takes a lot of persistence and dedication. But on a long term, it will pay off, like literally. And you will see the difference, especially when you join like public speaking, like Toastmaster, how confident you become as a person professionally and personally. So I always recommend people to like do what's most uncomfortable and you'll see the rewards that come from it. And especially like the Toastmaster one.
Words of wisdom from Urmi. So please tell us where to find you on social media.
Yes, so I have my own YouTube channel. It's called Urmi Hossain. People can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's called Urmi Hossain. And I also have my own blog. It's called myways.ca.
What is the blog again? Sorry.
myways.ca.
All right. So please spell Urmi Hossain for everybody.
So it's URMI. That's Urmi. And my last name is HOSSAIN.
That's Urmi Hossain. Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom with us about identity, finance, and the benefits of being a Toastmasters member.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Please don't forget to subscribe, give a rating and a review of this episode.